Have you ever felt a spark with someone you least expected? What if that person held a position of authority over you? In today's true LGBT story, witness how a late-night workout shattered the boundaries between a gym member and his instructor, leading to a locker room moment that changed everything. One late night in the empty gym, the quiet boundaries shattered between us, shifting everything in a single moment. The evening had started like any other, with me powering through my workout, muscles burning as I pushed through a tough set. Then there he was, Ethan, my gym instructor, tall and solid, moving with an easy confidence that was impossible to ignore. He had this magnetic presence, as if he commanded the entire space without even trying. Lately, it felt like his attention was focused a little more on me, and I couldn't help but notice. I had joined this gym a couple of months prior, driven by the usual New Year's resolution to get in shape, but I hadn't expected that Ethan would become the highlight of my workouts. He always had a word of advice or a quick joke that made the heavy lifts feel a bit lighter. Recently, it felt like his focus on me had shifted, like he was looking at me with a new interest, one that had nothing to do with weights or reps. I brushed it off as my imagination, thinking Ethan was like that with everyone, or so I thought. Still, every time he approached, my stomach flipped, and I found myself hoping he'd linger a bit longer. Tonight, something was different. The gym was nearly empty as I wrapped up my routine. The faint hum of treadmills in the background mixed with the clinking of weights. I was wiping down my bench when I felt a familiar presence behind me. Need any help with that? I turned to see Ethan standing close, a slight grin on his face. His gaze held mine a beat longer than usual, and my heart pounded as I realized he'd stayed late, just like me. Trying to act casual, I shrugged and chuckled. Only if you're looking for an excuse to avoid your own workout, I joked. He smirked, crossing his arms over his chest. You caught me, but in all seriousness. I've seen you working hard lately. You're pushing yourself pretty hard. Trying to keep up with the best, I replied, instantly regretting how cheesy it sounded. He didn't laugh it off as I'd expected. Instead, he looked at me with an intensity one hadn't noticed before. You're doing better than you think, he said quietly, his gaze never wavering. You've got potential. It's just a matter of refining it. I swallowed, unsure how to respond. It was one thing to admire him from afar, but now with him standing so close. Every word he spoke felt loaded, like there was a layer of meaning I couldn't quite reach. My face warmed under his gaze, and I forced myself to look away, focusing on the towel in my hands. Ethan broke the silence by clapping his hands together. How about a quick sparring session? I know it's not on the schedule, but I think it'd be a good way to end the night. My eyes widened. Sparring. I hadn't done anything remotely like that since high school gym class, but the thought of going toe-to-toe with him, feeling that rush, was oddly tempting. Why not? I found myself saying, despite the nerves bubbling up. He led the way to the gym's small training room, a space usually reserved for boxing and one-on-one training. The air felt thick with anticipation as we walked in, and I wondered if he could feel the tension too. Ethan handed me a pair of gloves and wrapped my hands, his fingers brushing my skin in a way that sent an unexpected thrill up my spine. All right, just follow my lead, he said, his voice taking on that authoritative tone he used when he was instructing. We squared up, and the first few rounds were basic, mostly him guiding me through punches and blocks. But as the session went on, he stepped up the intensity, pushing me to react faster, to dig deeper. His presence was magnetic, and I found myself hanging on every word, every small gesture of encouragement. Come on, you can do better than that, he called, dodging one of my attempts with ease. I laughed, winded, but exhilarated. Maybe you should stop holding back then. He raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. Oh, so you think I'm going easy on you? Maybe a little, I replied, surprising myself with the boldness in my tone. He smirked, and his next punch came faster than I anticipated. I barely had time to block, but the adrenaline rushing through me kept me going. We sparred for another few minutes, and each time our eyes met, there was a glimmer of something beyond just the sport, something that left me feeling both exhilarated and unsettled. Finally, he called time, and we both dropped our hands, breathing heavily. The room was silent except for our labored breaths, and the air between us felt charged, almost electric. For a moment, neither of us moved, just stood there catching our breath and looking at each other. "You've got potential," he said again, his voice low and serious. I tried to respond, but the words got stuck in my throat. It felt like there was so much more he wanted to say, something hovering just below the surface, but before I could read too much into it, he cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked, his tone casual again. "Yeah," I managed to reply, still trying to process what had just happened. As I watched him walk out of the training room, I realized that this routine was quickly becoming more than just a workout for me. The anticipation of seeing him, the quick exchanges, the lingering touches, they were starting to mean something. I never felt this kind of pull toward anyone, especially not a gym instructor, but there was no denying that Ethan had a way of getting under my skin, of making me feel seen in a way that left me both excited and vulnerable. After he left, I stayed in the gym for a few more minutes, letting the adrenaline wear off. But even as I tried to focus on my usual stretches and cool down, my mind kept drifting back to Ethan, his presence, his voice, the way he'd looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. The gym was quiet as I made my way to the locker room, the fluorescent lights buzzing softly above. I went through the motions of packing up my things, but my mind was still replaying our session. Every word, every look. It was like he'd left a part of himself in that room, a feeling I couldn't shake no matter how hard I tried. I was lost in thought, my head still swimming with the events of the night, when I heard footsteps approaching. I looked up expecting to see another late-night gym goer, but instead, it was Ethan again, standing in the doorway of the locker room, his expression unreadable. "Forgot my water bottle," he said, holding up the bottle as if to prove it, but there was something in his eyes, a hint of uncertainty that didn't match his usual confidence. "Oh," I replied, my voice a bit too loud in the quiet room. I tried to look casual, but my pulse quickened as he stepped further inside. He walked over to his locker, which happened to be only a few feet from mine. I could feel the tension between us, palpable and thick, like neither of us quite knew how to break the silence. Ethan cleared his throat, glancing at me as if he had something to say, but the words wouldn't come. "Well, good session tonight," he said finally, his voice softer than usual. "Yeah," I replied, a little breathless, thanks for the pointers. We stood there a bit awkwardly, neither of us moving, and in that moment I felt a connection, a strange, undeniable sense that something had shifted between us. It was subtle, just a look of quiet understanding, but it was there, hanging in the air. I wasn't sure what to say, so I just gave a quick nod and grabbed my bag, breaking the silence before it became too intense. But as I headed toward the exit, I could feel his gaze on me, watching, lingering in a way that sent a shiver down my spine. As I left the gym that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, that there was more waiting just below the surface, waiting to unfold in ways I couldn't yet understand. The next few days at the gym were a blur. Every time I stepped through those doors, I found myself scanning the room, looking for Ethan before I even realized it. I tried to keep my focus on my routine, telling myself I was just here to work out, to get stronger. But Ethan had a way of unsettling all my best intentions. It was like his presence filled every corner of the gym, even when he wasn't around. I managed to keep my head down for a few sessions, avoiding any direct interactions with him. But Ethan had his own way of making sure I didn't go unnoticed. On the third day after our sparring session, he caught me by surprise, pulling me aside just as I finished my set. "Hey, I've been watching your form," he said, arms crossed, that familiar smirk playing on his lips. "You've got good control, but you're not pushing yourself as much as you could." I felt my stomach twist with a mix of nerves and excitement. "I'm trying, just don't want to overdo it." He shook his head, amused. "The whole point is to push past that limit. How about I help you with that?" Before I could respond, he was guiding me over to the free weight section, setting up a heavier set than I would have dared to try on my own. I hesitated, eyeing the weights. "Trust me," he said, giving me an encouraging nod. "You can handle it." I bit my lip, unsure, but he was right there beside me, watching me as if I was the only person in the room. Under his gaze, I found myself lifting more than I thought I could, his quiet confidence contagious. As I pushed through the set, I felt a rush of adrenaline mixed with something else, a warmth that wasn't entirely from exertion. "That's it," he murmured, his voice low as I strained through the last few reps. "Keep going, you've got this." When I finally set the weights down, my arms trembling, I felt a rush of pride along with a deep, simmering awareness of how close he was standing. Our eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the air between us felt charged, heavy with unspoken words. But Ethan just gave me a satisfied smile and patted me on the shoulder. "See, told you could do it." I laughed, trying to shake off the tension. "Maybe you're just a good coach. Or maybe you're better than you think," he replied, his gaze lingering a bit too long. In the following days, that tension only grew. Every time we worked out together, there was a moment, sometimes just a look or a brush of his hand, where the atmosphere shifted. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I could feel it, a connection that was both thrilling and confusing. It was like we'd crossed some invisible line without even meaning to, and now we were stuck, unable to go back to how things used to be. One evening, just as the gym was closing, Ethan caught up to me near the entrance. "Heading out?" he asked, almost casually, but there was something else in his tone, something that made my heart beat faster. "Yeah," I replied, trying to sound as calm as he did. "Why?" He shrugged, glancing toward the parking lot. "Thought I'd walk you to your car. Not safe to be out here alone." I felt a flicker of surprise. It wasn't the first time we'd left around the same time, but he'd never offered to walk me before. I found myself nodding, my pulse quickening as he fell in a step beside me. The parking lot was nearly empty, the street lights casting long shadows on the pavement. We walked in silence, the quiet night air settling around us. I could feel the tension building, an unspoken weight that neither of us acknowledged. As we reached my car, I fumbled for my keys, suddenly hyper-aware of his presence just a few inches away. Ethan leaned against the side of the car, crossing his arms, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "So," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant, "are we going to talk about it?" I paused, my keys clutched in my hand. "Talk about what?" He gave a soft laugh, shaking his head. "You know what I mean, whatever this is between us." My heart pounded in my chest, and I looked away, unable to meet his gaze. "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied, though my voice sounded unsteady even to me. Ethan took a step closer, and I felt my breath catch as his hand lightly brushed my arm. The touch was brief, barely there, but sent a shiver through me. "Look, I get it," he murmured. "This probably isn't the smartest thing, but I think we both feel it." I wanted to deny it, to brush off his words like they meant nothing, but the truth was I did feel it. I've been feeling it for weeks now, every time he looked at me, every time he lingered a bit too close. Instead of responding, I just stood there, frozen in place, caught between wanting to take a step back and the urge to move closer. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy, until finally Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Maybe I'm wrong," he said, almost to himself, as if he was trying to convince himself of something. "Maybe it's all in my head." I opened my mouth to respond, to say something that would ease the tension, but no words came. Instead, I felt a surge of frustration mixed with a strange sense of longing. The logical part of me knew this was complicated, that getting involved with him could make things messy, but another part of me, the part that couldn't look away whenever he was near, didn't care about the risks. Before I knew what I was doing, I took a step forward, closing the distance between us. Ethan's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't move, his gaze locked on mine. "We both know it's not all in your head," I whispered, barely recognizing my own voice. For a moment, he just stared at me, as if trying to make sense of my words. And then, without warning, he broke into a smile, his hand reaching up to gently touch my shoulder. The touch was warm, grounding, and somehow it felt right. "Glad to know I'm not alone in this," he said softly, his fingers brushing my shoulder. The moment lingered, and I could feel the tension between us growing like an electric current. It was thrilling, a rush unlike anything I'd felt before. But just as quickly, I remembered where we were standing in a nearly empty parking lot, out in the open, with anyone able to see. I should go, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, even though part of me didn't want to leave. Ethan nodded, though his hand lingered on my shoulder for a second longer before he let go. Yeah, probably best. We stood there for another few seconds, neither of us willing to break the moment. But eventually, I forced myself to turn, sliding into my car and closing the door. As I pulled out of the lot, I glanced back, catching a glimpse of him watching me, a thoughtful look on his face. That night, sleep eluded me. My mind kept circling back to our conversation, to the weight of his gaze, the warmth of his hand on my shoulder. There was something between us, something real, and the thought of it both excited and terrified me. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend that nothing had changed, but another part, a deeper, more instinctive part, craved whatever this was, even if I couldn't fully understand it. The next day, I went to the gym with my heart racing, wondering if Ethan would act like nothing had happened or if he'd acknowledge the shift between us. But when I walked in, he greeted me with his usual nod, his expression as unreadable as ever. We went through the routine as if it was any other day, yet I could feel the tension simmering beneath the surface. Every time he corrected my form or gave me a tip, his touch lingered just a fraction of a second too long. Every glance felt charged, filled with an unspoken question that neither of us dared to voice. It was like we were playing a silent game, each of us testing the boundaries, pushing just a bit further without crossing the line. Finally, at the end of the session, Ethan caught my eye, a hint of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You staying late again?" he asked, his tone casual, but there was a spark in his eyes. "Maybe," I replied, feeling my pulse quicken as the last few people trickled out of the gym, leaving us alone in the quiet, empty space. I felt a familiar sense of anticipation building. Ethan walked over, leaning against the wall, his gaze steady on me. "So," he said, his voice low, "are we going to keep pretending, or are we actually going to do something about this?" His words sent a thrill through me, and I felt my cheeks flush. I wanted to say something clever, something that would match his confidence, but all I managed was a nod, my throat suddenly dry. He chuckled, shaking his head. "You're not making this easy, you know." I swallowed, trying to steady my voice. "Maybe I don't want it to be easy." Ethan's smile widened, and for a moment, we just stood there, caught in the tension that had been building for weeks. It felt like we were on the edge of something, a line we were both ready to cross, but neither of us willing to take the first step. And then, without another word, he reached out, his fingers lightly brushing my arm. The touch was subtle, almost hesitant, but it sent a jolt through me, a confirmation of everything we'd been dancing around. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, his hand lingering for just a moment before he pulled away. As I left the gym that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd started something we couldn't undo. The line had been crossed, even if we hadn't fully acknowledged it, and part of me was both terrified and exhilarated, wondering just how far this would go. I couldn't keep my mind off him. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face, the way he looked at me, the intensity in his eyes that seemed to see right through me. I tried to push the thoughts aside, telling myself it was just a crush, just a harmless infatuation. But as the days passed, it became harder to deny the pull between us. I never felt anything like it, a mix of excitement, nervousness, and something deeper that I couldn't quite put into words. The gym had always been a place of routine for me, a place to focus and unwind, but now every time I walked through those doors, I felt a rush of anticipation, a thrill that went beyond the workouts. It was all because of him. Ethan had become more than just my instructor. He was a constant presence in my mind, a source of energy that made everything else feel secondary. One evening, after most of the other members had cleared out, Ethan approached me, a familiar gleam in his eyes. He didn't even bother with the usual small talk, just nodded toward the back of the gym. "Meet me in the training room," he said, his voice low and steady. I followed him, my heart pounding with every step. The gym was quiet, The distant hum of machines the only sound as we entered the secluded training area. Ethan closed the door behind us, shutting out the rest of the world, leaving just the two of us in the dimly lit space. The room felt smaller than usual, the air thick with an unspoken tension that had been building for weeks. He turned to face me, his expression serious. "I think we both know why we're here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt a surge of nerves, but I held his gaze, refusing to look away. "Yeah, I think we do." Ethan took a step closer, his hand reaching out to gently touch my arm. The warmth of his skin against mine was electric, sending a shiver through me. I swallowed hard, every muscle in my body tensing as he closed the distance between us. "We've been dancing around this for too long," he murmured, his eyes searching mine, looking for any hint of hesitation. I didn't respond, couldn't find the words. Instead, I took a shaky breath, leaning into his touch, feeling the weight of his hand on my shoulder, grounding me, steadying me. The room was silent save for the faint sound of our breathing, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. Slowly, Ethan leaned in, his face inches from mine. My pulse quickened as I felt his breath against my skin, warm and steady. His hand slid up to cup the side of my face, his thumb brushing lightly over my cheek. A touch so gentle it made my heart ache. I closed my eyes, letting myself get lost in the sensation, the closeness, the anticipation, and then his lips met mine. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as if he was testing the waters. But as our lips moved together, the hesitation melted away, replaced by a heat that had been simmering beneath the surface for too long. His hand slid down to the back of my neck, pulling me closer, and I felt a thrill rush through me, a sense of surrender that left me dizzy. I brought my arms up, wrapping them around his shoulders, feeling the strength in his frame, the warmth radiating from him. Our bodies pressed together, and the world outside faded, leaving only the two of us locked in a moment I never wanted to end. The kiss deepened, growing more urgent, more intense, as if we were trying to make up for all the time we'd spent holding back. Ethan's fingers tangled in my hair, his grip firm but gentle, and I felt a shiver of excitement run through me. Every touch, every brush of his skin against mine, felt like a revelation, something new and exhilarating. I could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong, mirroring my own, and the closeness, the intimacy of it, was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. We finally pulled apart, both of us breathless, our foreheads resting together as we caught our breath. His hand still cradled my face, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my cheek. I opened my eyes to find him looking at me with a softness that made my chest tighten. "Are you okay?" he whispered, his voice filled with a tenderness that caught me off guard. I nodded, a small smile tugging at my lips. "More than okay." He chuckled softly, pressing a light kiss to my forehead before pulling me into a hug. We stood there in silence, wrapped in each other's arms, letting the moment sink in. It felt surreal, like a dream, but the steady beat of his heart beneath my ear grounded me, reminded me that this was real, that he was here holding me. After a few moments, he pulled back slightly, his gaze serious. "I don't want this to be a one-time thing," he said, his voice steady, unwavering. "I want to see where this goes. If you're okay with that." My heart skipped a beat at his words, a warmth spreading through me. "I'd like that too," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. A smile broke across his face, and he leaned in, pressing another gentle kiss to my lips as if sealing a promise. The kiss was softer this time, less intense, but just as meaningful, and I felt a flutter of happiness, a sense of belonging that I hadn't expected. We spent the next few minutes just talking, sharing quiet words and gentle touches, getting to know each other in a way we hadn't allowed ourselves before. The training room felt like a world of its own, a space just for us where nothing else mattered. I didn't want to leave, didn't want to step back into reality and risk losing this connection, this closeness that felt so new and fragile. But eventually, the reality of the world outside crept back in, and I knew we couldn't stay hidden away forever. Reluctantly, we pulled apart, each of us taking a deep breath as we steadied ourselves, preparing to face whatever came next. As we walked out of the training room side by side, Ethan reached over, giving my hand a quick, reassuring squeeze. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me, a silent promise that whatever happened, we'd face it together. The drive home was a blur. My mind was still spinning, replaying every moment, every touch, every whispered word. It felt surreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's life. Someone who was brave enough to reach out and take what they wanted, someone who didn't let fear hold them back. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive. The next day, I couldn't wait to get back to the gym, to see him, to feel that connection again. As soon as I walked through the doors, my eyes searched for him, my heart racing with anticipation. And when our eyes met across the room, I felt a spark, a silent acknowledgement that we were in this together. Throughout the workout, Ethan kept his distance, maintaining a professional demeanor. But there were moments, quick glances, subtle touches, a whispered comment that reminded me of the night before. It was like we were sharing a secret, something that only we understood, something that bound us together in a way that went beyond words. By the end of the session, I was both exhilarated and exhausted, my body sore, but my heart full. As I gathered my things, Ethan caught my eye, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked, his voice casual, but there was a hint of something deeper in his gaze. I nodded, smiling back. Wouldn't miss it. As I left the gym, I felt a warmth spread through me, a sense of anticipation for what was to come. For the first time, I wasn't just going through the motions, wasn't just surviving. I was living, feeling, experiencing something real, something that made every day feel brighter. The days that followed were a blur of stolen moments, quiet touches, and late-night conversations. Ethan and I found a rhythm, a balance between our public personas and the private connection we shared. It was exhilarating, a secret world just for us, a place where we could be ourselves without judgment, without fear. As the weeks passed, I found myself falling deeper, letting go of the walls I'd built, allowing myself to feel, to hope. There was a vulnerability in it, a risk that scared me. But with Ethan by my side, the fear seemed smaller, more manageable. But I knew that nothing this good could stay hidden forever. Eventually, we'd have to face the world, to confront whatever obstacles lay ahead. But for now, I was content to live in the moment, to savor every second, every kiss, every touch. As I lay awake that night, the memory of his lips still lingering on mine, I felt a strange sense of peace, a calmness that told me I was exactly where I was meant to be. The weeks that followed felt like living a double life. During the day, Ethan and I were the same, as we'd always been in public, friendly, polite, and professional. But in those quiet moments, when it was just the two of us, everything was different. Our shared glances had deepened, our brief touches felt heavier, and our conversations held an intimacy that went beyond words. It was as if the gym, once a place of routine, had become our sanctuary, a world where nothing mattered but us. One evening after a long session, Ethan invited me out for a late coffee. It was nothing extraordinary, a small cafe down the street, dimly lit and nearly empty at that hour, but the simplicity of it felt comforting. We sat by the window, our chairs close, our conversation meandering from lighthearted jokes to deeper topics about dreams and fears. I found myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't with anyone else. And every time he laughed or leaned in to listen, I felt a warmth that I couldn't quite describe. "So, why the gym?" he asked, a curious smile tugging at his lips. "I mean, what made you start this whole journey?" I paused, surprised by the question. Honestly, I wanted to feel stronger, more in control. I'd been through a rough patch and needed something stable, something that would give me a purpose. Ethan nodded thoughtfully, his gaze soft. "I get it. It's amazing how a little discipline can change everything." I smiled, feeling a sense of connection that went beyond attraction. He understood me in a way that felt grounding, and the realization left me a bit breathless. The conversation flowed naturally, and I felt like I could talk to him for hours, getting lost in the sound of his voice and the warmth of his presence. As we left the cafe, the night air was cool, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of rain. Ethan reached for my hand, intertwining our fingers as we walked. It was a simple gesture, but it made my heart skip, grounding me in the moment, reminding me that whatever this was real. We didn't talk much on the way back to the gym parking lot. Words weren't necessary. His hand in mine, the quiet of the night, the shared glances. It was enough. When we reached my car, I turned to face him, suddenly aware of the silence surrounding us, the weight of what hadn't been said. He looked at me, his expression serious, a hint of vulnerability in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. "I don't want this to just be some secret," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I want more. I want you to know that I'm here, that I'm serious." I felt my heart pound, his words echoing the emotions I'd been holding back. There had been moments where I'd wondered if this was all just a fleeting affair, something bound to end, but standing there with his hand in mine and his gaze steady, I knew this was something more. "I feel the same way," I whispered, barely able to contain the mixture of relief and joy that flooded me. "This is real to me, too." He smiled, a soft, genuine smile that made my chest tighten, and without another word, he pulled me into his arms. Our embrace was gentle, filled with an understanding that no words could capture. I felt safe, grounded, and strangely at peace. Over the next few days, we settled into this new reality. We no longer hid in the shadows, no longer pretended to be strangers. We went on quiet dates, shared simple moments, and got to know each other in ways that went beyond the walls of the gym. The more I learned about him, the more I felt myself falling. Ethan was more than I'd ever imagined, thoughtful, patient, and deeply caring. But as much as I cherished our time together, I knew we couldn't stay in this bubble forever. Life had a way of intruding, of testing even the strongest bonds. And as much as I wanted to believe we were immune to it, the reality was unavoidable. One afternoon while we were out for a walk, Ethan's phone buzzed with a message. He read it quickly, his expression tightening, and I felt a pang of worry. "What is it?" I asked gently. He looked at me, hesitation flickering in his eyes. "My job's offering me a transfer to a gym in another city. It's a big opportunity, but it would mean leaving here, leaving us." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken questions. I felt my heart sink, the weight of the situation crashing down on me. The thought of him leaving, of not having him in my life, felt unbearable, but I also knew that this was a chance for him, something he'd worked hard for. "I want you to take it," I said, my voice steady even as my heart ached. "You deserve this, Ethan. Don't let us hold you back." He looked at me, pain flickering in his gaze. "You're not holding me back. You're the best thing that's happened to me." I managed a small smile, feeling a bittersweet warmth spread through me. "And that's why you have to go. You need to chase your dreams, to do what makes you happy." The silence stretched between us, each of us processing the reality of what was happening. Finally, Ethan took my hand, his grip firm, his expression filled with determination. "This isn't goodbye," he whispered, his voice filled with conviction. "I don't care how far away I am. I'll make it work. We'll make it work." I nodded, feeling a mixture of sadness and hope. I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this wasn't the end, that we could survive the distance. But a part of me knew that life didn't always work out the way we wanted. We spent the rest of the day together, savoring every moment, every laugh, every touch, and when the time came to say goodbye, he pulled me into one last embrace, pressing a gentle kiss to my forehead, a silent promise that we'd find our way back to each other. As I watched him walk away, a bittersweet ache settled in my chest. I didn't know what the future held, didn't know if we'd managed to keep our connection alive despite the miles that would soon separate us. But as I stood there, the memory of his touch, his voice, his laughter filling my mind, I felt a quiet sense of peace. Maybe we'd make it work, maybe we wouldn't, but whatever happened, I knew that he'd left a mark on me. A memory that would stay with me no matter where life took us. As I walked back to my car, a small smile tugging at my lips, I realized that meeting him, knowing him, had changed me in ways I couldn't have anticipated. In the end, I knew that whether or not we'd find our way back to each other didn't matter as much as the time we'd shared, the memories we'd created. He had been my beginning, my unexpected adventure, and for that, I'd always be grateful. And while our story wasn't perfect, it was ours, full of laughter, longing, and a closeness that would stay with me wherever I went. If you enjoyed this emotional story, please give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe to LGBT Stories for more heartfelt and captivating LGBT tales. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced an unexpected connection like this?